alaikum and welcome to Open Dialogue here on Ahlebait TV. And I would love to welcome all of you dear viewers watching from different platforms. Welcome tonight for inshallah another topic and a great guest. And we are addressing obviously social issues which are really important to the community. And tonight I have a really special guest with me today who is dealing with these kinds of issues. So inshallah I would love to welcome my guest for tonight, Farzana Karawlli. Assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show today.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and I think this topic is so important. We are going to be discussing tonight the community intervention and support on offer for domestic abuse. And I want to go straight into this, Farzana, because I think that we have discussed a lot of this kind of topics before, but we want to bring it a little bit different. And I know your angle is slightly more case study basis, so it's going to be more realistic. It's going to give us more insight. So how would you like to introduce this topic for tonight? And please, I want to remind any one of you who's going through this to please do reach out. And this is also a live call-in show. You are more than welcome to give in your comments and any questions to myself and my guest tonight.
So I'd like to start with a case study, but obviously this is not a case study of one of the cases that I've worked with. This is quite a well-known case study. There was a lady called Hussain from Pakistan. She was a successful architect and she got married and emigrated to New York, where, and this I think was just before the 9/11 attacks. She settled in New York with her husband, and sometime later she felt, because of the issues around 9/11, she wanted to try and bridge the gap between the West and the Muslims and try and get a better understanding. So she asked her husband, can I set up a TV channel, which she did. And from the face of it, their relationship seemed good from the outside. But I think a few years later, she was found dead, beheaded in her offices. The husband handed himself in, saying that he was the one that killed her. And what we found out later, what was found out later, was that she had called the police out many times with protection orders and things like that to try and keep herself protected, but obviously nothing did protect her. She ended up dying. And this is not a rare case. I think just a week before she was actually murdered by her husband, she had started the process for divorce. We see cases like this, maybe not with such an extreme ending, but we don't want to risk a situation like that. And I think this is why we need to be talking about this and talking more about what can we do within the community to help this situation, to help both couples within this relationship where there is abuse. How can we try and manage this abusive relationship to such an extent that the abuse stops, there's support gone in for the husband, if it's the husband, if it's the wife that's abusing, then the wife, and the victim, what support can we give to the victim? And I think that's really the conversation that I would like to have today and what is available out there. So
I think what you've sort of introduced is really important, and even though it's a case study from the past, like you mentioned, unfortunately it does happen today, especially in your line of work and mine. We do see these kind of cases that do still exist, unfortunately, even in our community. But the thing is, we need to obviously identify, like you said, the kind of domestic abuse that maybe a lot of people don't realize that it actually is abuse, and actually what is the outlining problems that may cause this, and the support that is given, because I think a lot of it is having the lack of knowledge to actually take this further. Even if there are systems out there to help, if they don't recognize what is the actual assistance that needs to be addressed, then that's something that we need to obviously address as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I first wanted to address exactly the definition of abuse and violence, because I feel we ban these words around so much, but we don't really look into it. So violence, what is that? It's about physical force, hurting somebody, damaging something, yeah, which we know. But abuse is to some extent just, it's cruelty Violence can be included within abuse, but it's something that happens regularly or repeatedly. Then it's an improper way of behaving with somebody. So it's abuse is quite vast in some ways. Now, if we look at the types of abuse, I mean, I've got kind of case studies and things that I want to obviously discuss to make it more real in terms of what is violence and what is abuse. But when we look at abuse, we look at physical abuse, which is violence. We look at sexual abuse, again, that can be violent. We look at financial abuse. We look at emotional abuse, and we look at neglect. Those are the 5 key principles, but there are other types of abuse as well that can happen. But obviously, on the whole, that's what we look at. And if we look at how somebody can be scarred in such a relationship, if they're in a violent relationship, you will see scars unless the victim purposefully kind of masks those scars with makeup or whatever they can, or stays away until the scars go away. But what we find that when it's a domestic abuse, you can't see those scars. Those scars are internal. Those are so well hidden. The person could be going about their normal life and you have no idea. Just like in the case of Asya, where there was domestic abuse happening at home, but they were people that were on camera. They were being seen by others together. The people they worked with, there was no sign of abuse happening. Nobody knew. It was a shock to the whole, to everyone really that knew them. These kind of things happen behind closed doors and in secrecy. And I think we need to realize that domestic abuse affects both men and women. We find that with men, it's more abuse than it is violence. So it'll be maybe financial abuse, emotional abuse, and things like that. And again, it's unseen. So, we don't have statistics for that either, because it's unseen. Whether it's men or women, the statistics aren't going to be accurate. But what I can say is with domestic abuse and domestic violence, 1 in 4 women, that's what we know, 1 in 4 women are affected by abuse. So
what do you find when it comes to our communities and highlighting these kinds of issues, especially around abuse? And obviously we're talking about it because a lot of it is happening within marital relationships, let's be honest. At the same time, as much as abuse does happen for both genders, majority of it again is for the women that do actually face this kind of sort of issue. Before we go into that, I just want to say Assalamu alaikum. Welcome so much to our scholar Syed Rizvi. I hope you're well tonight. We are discussing domestic abuse and the community intervention and the support that is available. How are you tonight? Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah. I had a whole day of dealing with abusive cases today.
Oh, wow. So this is so relevant tonight. Unbelievable. But no, I will come back to you, Syed, in a minute. I'll let you settle in. So, Farzana, what else can you sort of give? Because this show is important. We don't have enough time. We don't want to go into things that we can actually get on the internet. We can Google. We want someone who is here, who is in the forefront, who is dealing with these kinds of issues, so that you can actually give some sort of takeaway to individuals that are watching, kind of things that you want to highlight. What is it? Because I know you've got a list of things that you want to talk about. I'm going to leave it to you to put forward.
So when we talk about abuse, it's not always between husband and wife or wife and husband. It could be abuse of the children. It can be abuse of something that we're seeing, abuse of elderly parents by their elder children. And a lot of the time we're finding it's financial abuse. There is physical abuse as well. We've had cases even within our communities where there has been physical violence, even resulting in death. So I think, and then we don't obviously talk about it, which we shouldn't, but we should understand that these things are happening in our communities. We also are seeing abuse from, for example, we're seeing that a lot of women aren't able to marry at the moment because there seems to be a shortage in some ways in men, throughout the world. There are more women than there are men. And this is affecting not just our communities, but communities elsewhere as well, that women are struggling to find men And as a result, what we're finding is a lot of the women that unfortunately aren't able to get married at a certain time are still living at home. And when they're living at home, what's happening is family members, whether it's the father or whether it's the elder brother, usually it could even be an elder sister, but usually it's a male of the family that obviously takes control of the family within our Asian culture. And what we find is that they become either very restrictive, and they deprive this person that could be even 35 years old plus of doing anything within the home, out of the home, because of the stigma that we've created within our community that a woman shouldn't be seen out unless she's with her husband. And so the woman is very much restricted with what she can do. Financially, her finances may be taken off her, even if she's going to work and coming home with her own money, they may be taken off her because there's a fear, a bit like how we used to hear a lot about honor killings on the news before. You know, there may not be honor killings happening as much. There may be, we don't know. We don't know the statistics. It's not always clear unless, you know, there's been a death, but there might be honor abuse. And that we don't hear about, we don't see about until it's got to such a stage where, you know, it might become an honor killing. What we need to be careful of is just because of our culture and the way our community sees certain things, we shouldn't do injustice. That injustice is abuse. You know, if we're emotionally treating somebody, you know, you can't find a husband, you're not this and you're not that, and you can't do this, and that's all emotional abuse at the end of the day, you know. They also have a right to a life at the end. You know, we're all born and we all have our own achievements that we have to achieve. We have our own needs that need to be met. And so we cannot be stumping somebody else's growth because of stigma.
Absolutely. I think what you've said is so important, and I think the fact that you've highlighted some realistic scenarios which we may not even consider as abuse by being, you know, treating another individual in a particular way because of circumstance. The circumstances that you've actually highlighted, it's quite scary actually, because a lot of people do actually probably accept that as the norm, like you said, because thinking that it's probably the cultural norm or tradition, or because they are in a particular way, then it's acceptable. Before I come back to you, Farzana, I just want to come back to the Syed. It's really so unbelievable that you've had to also deal with these kinds of cases all the time, and I know that you deal with it, a lot of family issues. So Syed, what are the things that you're seeing at this very moment in time when it comes to domestic abuse, and why do you think that it's still continuing in this day and age with our teachings, with our knowledge, with knowing how we actually have faith and belief? And how is this still possible and still actually happening today?
The biggest problem is that although Islam has come around, I mean, Islam has survived around 1,400 years, but the places where Islam has gone, the cultural values have taken over Islam. And in many places, they don't respect what Islam says. For example, Islam, according to Islamic teachings, a wife's earning is wife's earning. Or if a wife contributes anything towards mortgage in case of divorce or at the time of death, she can claim all of what she has spent on the house, or even she can claim a salary or whatever she has spent on the children. She can ask for breastfeeding money, all these things, but these are suddenly all ignored. And women are actually forced to forgive all their rights at the time of divorce. So, but fortunately, the women are learning and educating themselves and defending their rights now. For example, I was dealing with a case today, and the person has been married to the lady for 20 years. And during 20 years, all he has done is sat in front of the TV and played computer games and bought expensive jackets from the benefit money for himself and not provided. And when I say, well, you have not provided your wife, he says, well, the benefits were given to her and she was using all of it. And unfortunately, there are some ulama who also misinterpret this, and he said, well, if she was getting money, that's her income and nafaqah, which is wrong. The man has to work and provide for the family, and if he doesn't provide, that is considered as abuse as well. And if the wife spends any money on the household or children or anything to do with the family issues, which is she is not obliged to do that, she has the right to claim it unless she had officially forgiven that I have given this money and I will not claim that in future. So unfortunately, this is all and again, I have witnessed that people use Quran and Hadith to do religious abuse on their wives, and while they ignore what their own responsibility is under Islamic law and teachings. And unfortunately, there are so many cases, and also these cases exist within ulama and scholars' families, which is really appalling.
You know, I'm feeling absolutely honored and blessed to have you, Syed, speak today, because you're one of the very few that actually do stand up. And I know you for many years to be able to do this. And I have referred people to yourself, my personal friends, in order for you to deal with this, because I know how fair and just you are. And it's so important that we have this show, because we don't hear these kinds of things. And people always condemn the fact that we are backward or we are doing things in a particular way, but it's not the religion. It is not amazing Sayyids like we have tonight on the show, who stands up for justice and what's right. And it's so clear as to what he's saying. And it's absolutely refreshing to know that this is our religion and this is a show to express what is the reality of what goes on today, which is the norm and is not acceptable. And we really need to voice this very clearly and very loudly, as our Sayyid has mentioned. And I think, this topic is even going to be more important as we move on to the conversation. So, Farzana, what else would you like to add to this discussion in order for us to have more sort of awareness so that we can actually avoid these kinds of things to continue? Because it's really nothing to do with our faith at all.
So a lot of the cases that I'm getting are sexual abuse, and from what you were saying, Syed, thank you very much. I think you really hit the nail on the head, and it just shows by us talking about the same thing that how real this is. A lot of issues around sexual abuse. So I've heard where stories that have come to me, and they're not stories because you can see the pain the person is in physically, that they are being used, as it were, for their needs. Husbands are using the wives for their needs, saying that, in Islam, you have to provide for me. And if that's what I want, that's what I want. But there is a limit to what a woman and her body can accept. And that's not respected. How does a woman like that leave that relationship, particularly if there's children involved? And who can she show that that is happening to her? Yet again, that's the kind of abuse that goes, that's unseen. And not only does it physically affect that woman, it affects her health. It affects her ability to trust anyone in her life, and it affects her emotionally. So we need to be very much aware of this. That's not the only type of sexual abuse that we are seeing. I've had cases where members of the extended family, this is not even children, this is adults, have sexually abused adults within the family, particularly women, sexually abusing women and saying to them that if you do not comply, I will tell your husband, or I will tell your parents, or I will tell that you are the one that has come on to me. We need to be very much aware of these kind of things that are happening. What we find is when these women are going to sheikhs, when they're going to the community, because they have no evidence of this, there is no evidence there, they're not being trusted. they're not being heard. And I find that very difficult to accept, that if you can spend 15 minutes with somebody that's gone through abuse, you will know whether that abuse is real or not. But we don't give them the time of day because we like to sit on the fence, because if we make a judgment, we don't know whether it's right or wrong, but somebody has to somehow intervene and make a judgment somewhere. It's not just the court's responsibility. By the time it's gone to court, that time between the person trying to gain support from the police, from the courts, or wherever else, what's going to happen in that interim? Some of these women are becoming homeless. If they don't,
I do have a caller line, Farzana. Sorry to interrupt you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
You're live on Ahlebait TV. What would you like to say?
Basically, thank you for bringing this topic, which is of so much need and importance to people like myself who have suffered domestic abuse, but more so what in line of what Sheikh was just saying, that the financial abuse that is happening, and also the religious abuse, which is being underlined by the community and overseen. Because fortunately, I have had the pleasure to know Farzana, and she has helped me immensely, and she was God sent to me. But however, I find that the community still lacks in the support that they need to provide for the women who are vulnerable at the moment. And in my case, I went from being the victim to the perpetrator. I've been ostracized by my own community. I've been name called. I've been isolated purely because I decided to speak up about a right which I have. And it's really detrimental to my health. It's been detrimental to my well-being, and I find that I don't know. There is nowhere to go, because you are constantly told that it's something wrong that you're doing. So, for instance, in my case, I don't know how long I have. Do I have time?
No, you have enough time. This is for you. Please continue.
So basically, in my case, my ex-husband, after 18 years of marriage, informed me that he had taken a second wife, and I refused purely because my views on polygamy are very different to what perhaps the Islamic views are.
Mm-hmm.
And although I have versed with it, I find it quite difficult in the West accepting that, and purely because of that, I was given the divorce, both Islamically and legally, without any settlement, without financial remedies. And I find myself going from a very respectable person in the community to becoming the villain, because I'm talking about a person who's honorable, a person who is respected, and a person who has high esteem within the community. And I find completely isolated. Had it not been for Farzana and a few ladies who are there to support each other, I don't know where I would be. And I think we need to wake up. I'm educated. I was well versed in both Sharia and English law, not law, but legal systems, and yet I was victim of a huge plan that I don't even know how to come out of it. And this is abuse. It's emotional abuse that takes a toll on mental health, takes a toll on physical health. And as a person who, in my 40s, to be left with 3 kids, no financial remedies, no financial settlement, even though I'm a partner to the business that we had, I find that quite insulting and abusing. And I just don't know what support systems are there by the community, because when I speak to Shia and Ulema, they tend to say that you need to do sabr, Allah will take care of your affairs. And it's reassuring that Allah will take care and there will be justice at the end of the day. But what do we do in the meantime? How do we deal with trauma? And where do we go for support?
Thank you so much for calling in and being so brave. I really do appreciate everything that you've said, and inshallah we will try and address some of the things that you highlighted. Thank you so much again. Inshallah, wish you all luck in the future. Thank you so much for that call. It was an absolute eye-opener, the reality of what's happening. And it's very hard myself not to even get sort of emotional about the things that are actually happening today. And I want to also thank you, Farzana, for your time, because this is such an important issue. Syed, what do you respond to that? Because, you know, there is definitely a sincere cry for help. For an individual that has gone through this recently, going through this at the moment, and especially when it comes to our faith and our communities and the people that are the leaders, what is there that is available for someone like her that's just called?
Unfortunately, there isn't much available, especially in our Shia Muslim community. We are very weak and way behind. We don't have safe houses, we don't have special facilities. I remember around 10 years ago, somebody offered a huge place for a safe home, but we couldn't take it over because there was no one willing to give us the financial backing for it. People are ready to open huge imambaras and centers with no benefit for the community. Our imambaras and community centers should be service providers for all these kind of issues. They should become the hub of.
We do have online, Syed. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. You're live on Ahlebait TV. What would you like to say?
Hello, alaikum salam.
Go ahead.
I'd like to first thank you for the show and bringing this topic to the attention of the audiences, because I think, and I'm sure you can tell by the callers, that it's a very important topic. It's definitely one that needs to be addressed. So thank you very much for bringing it to light. I wanted to add to the previous callers in terms of the community and what the community is doing.
Okay, go ahead.
In terms of the support. I think in my case, I've definitely had very similar experience to the previous caller. I find that it's been hard to get support within the community. I think also not being the fault of the Ulema. I think as part of the community, you have to have sort of a balance between. It's sort of like you as a victim and a perpetrator, there are two different stories. And so you get two different angles and you have to maintain a balance. And also, I think it is the responsibility of the ulama to ensure that they are supporting both parties and trying to mediate. But unfortunately, in a domestic violence situation, it's very difficult to mediate, which is obviously why when you're going through a court system, they wouldn't require you to mediate your affairs during a separation. So I think I feel like there needs to be more for those victims, because then they're left vulnerable without support. And from my perspective, the community, in the community, it doesn't exist. The process of mediating for a particularly domestic violent relationship, and a lot of women who experience this, they tend to lose their self-confidence in the process. They may be very capable, but I think with the years of oppression that they've received, especially if it is psychological oppression, they tend to lose a lot of their self-confidence and their ability to see rationally and to think practically, especially if they don't have the right support. I benefited from having a good support to be able to help me, but I think a lot of people are left alone in this process. And if you're reaching out to the community, I think it's really important to have some support. And I think having mediation, which is sort of taking a balanced approach, doesn't work for domestic violence cases. I'd like to know what can be done.
Thank you so much for your call and sharing your story. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear you and you finding it a safe space to speak tonight. Inshallah, we will try and answer your question as well. Thank you so much, and thank you for calling in. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have been addressing this issue. And as we can tell, it's really, really important. Thank you, Syed, for being honest as well, to express that actually there isn't much there that's really actually in our community for support. And that's why someone like yourself, Farzana, is so important. And I know you do have a support system. Please do reach out to Sister Farzana, and she has got, the ability to actually help. What more can you add to what needs to be done in order for us to work, maybe not just to support the victims, but to actually make it a bigger platform to work alongside the leaders, the ulama, the community, or whatever that needs to be done in order for us to actually have a system set up so that these things are not going to be continuously overlooked? Farzana, what do you think? Working in the front line, knowing exactly what is required.
I think there needs to be a roundtable discussion in every community, with every, with the executive committees, with the alims, with the volunteers. Everyone needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. At the end of the day, it's a safeguarding thing. We are very versed on safeguarding of children. Even still, I just want to add there that there is a lot of hiding of abuse of children as well. But we are better versed on safeguarding of children. So what about safeguarding of adults? They don't have to be vulnerable. The issue with domestic abuse is that they are made vulnerable. Even though they are not classed legally as vulnerable citizens, they are made vulnerable through the abuse to the extent that they're drowning and they cannot get help. They can't get up for air and they cannot get the help. So I think these discussions need to happen. We need to be able to include these conversations from the member. Yeah, we need to be able to talk openly. We need more support groups. Alhamdulillah, I've been fortunate to be skilled through the work I do in social work and nursing and through coaching to be able to run support groups and have a holistic approach. I have worked in many different areas that I have contacts within the local area, but I would have most of the contacts locally. We need to be able to start up these support groups in all areas, Can I just say that people that do need support, I just want to call out a couple of support services that might be able to help. Always go to Citizens Advice on their website. There are a lot of links to other services. Now, I know we do usually want to go for something that's Sharia compliant or, Muslim based where we get a better understanding, but sometimes that may not be possible. It may be worth just starting somewhere, get an understanding of your legal rights. Yes, I think that's something that we're very backward on. And this is with any area, we should be quite versed with the law. And so any situation we're in, we we know where we stand. There's some services like Indian Ladies UK, that's particularly for people that have come from India, that have come on their spousal visa. So they don't have right within the country. This is another issue. They don't have the right within the country, and they don't have right to recourse of public funds. So where do they go? Financially, they're abused. They have no money for themselves. Physically abused. They try to leave their home. There's nowhere to go. They can't get a shelter. They can't get any money from the government. Either they go on the streets or they go back in and face that abuse until maybe death. A bit like Asya. There's a service called Muslim Women's Network that you can search online, and they provide a lot of support in different areas. There's the Southall Black Sisters if you're local. I know that a lot of people have had support from them. I'm only naming these particular places because of cases that I've worked with, that I've seen support come from them, and some of these services I know personally. GP, always speak to your GP. That's a confidential service, and the GP will be able to guide you, or at least record that you have gone there for support. That's very valuable. Talking therapies, the GP can refer you to if there's any emotional issues, mental health issues that you need to deal with. Do reach out to community members if your gut feeling is that you trust them. Yeah, so don't feel you.
Important. Farzana, unfortunately, we have come towards the end of the show, and I know you've got so much more information. And do please reach out to Farzana. She's on. Do you have a website? Is there someone that can, contact you in that way?
Facebook or Instagram under Farzana Inspires, but I'm happy to leave my number with yourselves to share if anyone needs. If they can call in, then they can take the number.
Yes, do call in. And as I was saying, Syed was also mentioning that we are lacking in this department. Before we end, Syed, what would be your advice and guidelines to what's the next steps that we have to take as a community, as faith members, as leader yourself? What do we need to do so that we can actually collaborate and get this something which is very much so lacking and definitely a need in the community?
I think we, and especially Ulema and the centers, have responsibility to educate people that we are living in this society. The society we live is a non-Muslim society, and Muslims need to help each other and support each other for developing our community centers with all these facilities. We need support for elderly, we need support for the younger generation, we need support for the ladies who need safe homes, we need also a place for children. And I personally know there are many Muslim children who are going through the domestic violence at home, and because of the parents not being fit to handle them, the children are given to the social services, and they end up in a non-Muslim environment, a non-Muslim house. So we need to work hard on these issues together. All the community centers should have, as sister was mentioning as well, have a united body or round table or seminar or conference, which is not just conference. We have to achieve some results, how to help each other in this society. Look at the Jewish community. I mean, they have centers. In some areas, they have several centers, but each center is doing a different responsibility. They are not contradicting with each other. There's nothing wrong to have more centers, but responsibility should be given. One center should deal with elderly, other center should deal with youngsters, and so on.
Thank you so much. It's unfortunate that we have come to the end of the show, but hopefully something like today has given a lot more insight as to what is still required. And inshallah, I would love to have you back again, Sister Farzana, because we've only just touched the surface, and I will definitely have you back again. I know that we have so many more topics to actually address, even not just with this particular one. And I really do appreciate, Syed, your always amazing insight. Farzana, your unbelievable input as what you do personally as well. And I know both of you, Farzana and our Syed, that helps the community individually, but we do need to actually have more individuals to collaborate so that this show can provide that kind of platform and that information. And I really do thank you so much for those callers that have actually did call in, and anybody who is going through this, I do urge you to reach out and do call into the studio or your local GP or any one of the members that was here